Hey, welcome back to another doujinshi review from White Album 2. Now today we're going to be reviewing another novel-style fanbook from White Album 2. And this one's particularly interesting because it focuses on a character that not many fan books or arts or anything do. Actually, it's a very rare character in general. So this is Tomo Yanagihara. Tomo was basically Setsuna's rival, even though Setsuna didn't remember who she was. She was always running for Miss Hojo High, always losing to Setsuna. She was the original circle crusher. And she is beautiful, but she is really, really mean in the games. And so it was kind of interesting to read this book and get a little more perspective, even though it is a fan-written novel. And this is not canon. Now, it does say it gives heavy spoilers for the game in general, but also this takes place after Kazusa's Coda route ending. So it is neat. So one of the things about this novel in particular is it's sort of a two-part omnibus. So before this, part 1 of this story was released, and then this one was released as part 1 and 2 together. Part 2 by itself was never released. So this includes part 1 and part 2. If you open up, first, the title. The title of this is The Weather Girl is Rough. So focusing on Tomo, if you open up to the first page, it says right here, this is part 2. And it does give you a little blurb here. It says, if you want to read part 1, please go to page 29. So interesting how they decided to do it backwards, parting part 2 before part 1, because you quite literally have to flip to the middle of the book here in order to get to part 1. It doesn't even start from the first page. So interesting setup. Can't say I'm a big fan. I wish they would have put part 1 before part 2. But anyway, so let's go ahead and look at part 1. So White Album 2, Tomo Yanagihara's side story. This was written by Ushineko. Ushineko, I love him. He's done a lot of the White Album novels. And Enna, again, is the illustrator. We've seen a lot of Enna as well. So this part comes after the Setsuna route ending the double S. So beware of spoilers. This one came out in 2018, part 1. Part 2 came out later on in 2019. So this whole book, I would say an omnibus, came out in 2019. So basically, one of the premises, the premise of this story really is Tomo and talking to Takeya saying, hey, if this band succeeds, I'm going to date you. So going all the way back into their high school years, and then Takeya just kind of falling head over heels for Tomo, even though she's not super nice. And it just continues on saying she really wants to beat Ogiso. She really wants to beat Setsuna, basically. And some of the struggles of that. And then Takeya really falling hard for Tomo. I'll get her. I'm not used to seeing Tomo merch at all. So yeah, that would be part 1. We'll go ahead and look at the credits on part 1 just because. You can find Ushineko on Twitter, you can find Ina on Twitter, and then here are their pixives if you want to check them out. Again, this whole thing came out in 2019. So then we move back. Again, the setup of this book is very odd. Can't say I'm a fan of it. Then we move back to part 2. And part 2 comes a lot later. And it just goes on to focus on the complex relationships between her and Takeya, and then her and Setsuna, because Setsuna continues to be just so nice to Tomo, like throughout the whole thing. Setsuna is kind to a fault, I think. So really, it's just Tomo's thoughts about all their relationships in general and how she kind of, I wouldn't say meddles and I wouldn't say butts in, but how she kind of interacts with all of the different characters, whether it be for better or for worse. I'm not a huge Tomo fan in general, to be quite honest. I don't like characters that are purposefully mean to others to try to get ahead. But it does give you an interesting perspective as far as coming from a side character that isn't normally talked about as much. So it does get pretty deep into that. And it's a well-rounded story in general. And then in the end, a little bit of German, English and German. I still love you, which I think is kind of beautiful because no matter what, no matter how rude, how cruel she was, Takeya will always love her. And it's interesting also because Takeya is such a player. He is, known for being kind of a scummy guy, if you think about it. So for him and Tomo to end up together is just interesting. It's interesting and it's a good read in general. It's nice. It's a nice way to round out your collection just because she is such an untold character for the most part. And then that is the end. Tomo Yanagihara's side story. So, thank you so much for joining me on this doujinshi review today. I'll be back at you with more doujinshi reviews from White Album 2 in the future. Until then, I hope you take care. See you!